this is Brad, and welcome back to the Analog Universe. This is episode 9, Proofs. So I've been talking about my different theories on relativity and quantum mechanics, but what are the proofs? We now live in an era where experiments to prove the next theory in physics, right or wrong, are expensive. How expensive? To build the neutrino detector that they've built in the Antarctic, it cost $278 million. The CERN super collider that they built in order to detect the Higgs boson, among other things, cost about $40 billion. Not enough. They're building an international thermonuclear experimental reactor to prove whether it's possible or not to create energy using a fusion reaction, with a possible projected cost of $65 billion. Okay, so what would it cost to do some experiments to prove these theories? Well, I've already suggested the first one, and that's doing the math that I've suggested in my first episode. Wouldn't cost a thing. Just someone's time to sit down and run the math to see if the figures support what I've postulated in that first episode. So call me a gadfly. Somebody that needs to be proven wrong so he'll shut up and go away. Which, by the way, I'm happy to do. But I've had these ideas around for a couple decades now. Every now and then I run them past a physicist that I run into and typically get patted on the head and told, there, you just don't understand relativity. But to date, no one's ever explained to me why I'm wrong. I'm just saying, if I'm wrong on any of these issues, then I'm wrong on that issue. But if it's right, if the ideas I'm positing here are correct, it could change the direction physics is going. So what would it cost? Again, to do the math, nothing. Here's another possible experiment. We talked about it last episode, the Michelson-Morley experiment. They never thought to point their interferometer up. There've got to be interferometers around someplace. Take one and point it up. What's the cost of that? Couldn't be much. Certainly not $65 billion. We've been told for the last 150 years or so that there's no ether, that the Michelson-Morley experiment has definitively proved that. But it didn't, because, as we've discussed, if these sum particles, these subatomic particles that composed what they used to think of as the ether, exist, then they would be headed straight down from above us down to the center of the Earth, not in the direction the Earth is traveling or away from it. So take an interferometer, point it up. Do we get an interference pattern? If not, then the Michelson-Morley experiment has finally proven what it set out to prove. If it does, then we've got an interesting path that we can examine in much greater detail. Here's another possible test you could do. Again, the math is beyond me, but someone out there can do it. Someone who knows the equations of fluid dynamics. So I'm postulating that the courses of the planets and asteroids around the sun are matter that's got caught up in the flow of these sum particles, what they used to call the ether. Similarly, the courses of the stars in galaxies, according to this hypothesis, would be, again, matter caught up in the flow of these some particles as they circle around the supermassive black hole at the center of a galaxy. Okay, now next time we're going to talk about dark matter, but just to get ahead of ourselves a little bit here, the idea of dark matter has been postulated because the stars in galaxies don't orbit, don't swirl around the center the way they should, according to Einstein's theory of general relativity. Okay, since they don't move the way they're supposed to, physicists have posited this dark matter to make them move the way they're in fact moving. Well, we're going to talk about that next time, but that seems to me a fairly large step to take in order to get the stars moving the way they're supposed to under general relativity. But I'm saying, hey, is it possible they're swirling around the way they do? They're moving in these galaxies because they're caught up in this whirlpool of some particles that's swirling around the supermassive black hole in the center of the galaxy. Okay, well, if that's the case, it seems like fluid dynamics might possibly have some answers for us. I don't know if this is the case at all, but if we look at fluid dynamics, there's got to be the equations for whirlpools and how they move. What about the winds swirling around the eye of a hurricane? Do both of these vortices, or either of them, resemble the dynamics of stars swirling around the center of a galaxy? Now, obviously, there are major problems with this, starting with viscosity. Water is a very viscous medium. And the question obviously becomes, okay, if light is propagated through the interactions with these some particles that permeate the galaxy, then how viscous is the galaxy? And the answer to that is clearly the viscosity level there would have to be analogous to materials that are superconductive with respect to electricity. The viscosity would be as close to zero as you can get it. So would the equations that describe the motions of swirling water or winds in a hurricane apply to a galaxy when the viscosity is so different? I don't know, but it might be worth looking at. Another test cost somebody a few $1,000s. Don't know if it would prove anything for sure, but might indicate that we're going in the right direction, or might indicate that we're totally in the wrong direction. Either way, a few $1,000. So take a very heavy javelin. Take it up far enough that you know that it's going to reach terminal velocity before it hits the ground. And drop it down. Get the speed of that javelin as it hits the ground or the water. That's pretty much going to be your terminal velocity of these some particles at sea level. Adjust for whatever minor air resistance there'd be, and there you got the terminal velocity. So if the terminal velocity of these some particles at sea level, let's say, is 900 miles an hour, then the speed of a beam of light pointed up away from the center of the Earth would be the speed of light minus this 900 miles an hour. Is it possible at this point to measure the speed of light that finely? 186,000 miles per second minus 900 miles an hour? I don't know if it is, but if it is, measure that. Again, that's not proof positive, but it's an indication that this is worth looking into even further. So there have been some indications that neutrinos or other particles can be accelerated past the speed of light. at the CERN Particle Accelerator. And you look online and you can see explanations. Oh, it was a calibration error. Some of the mechanism failed during the experiment, or this or that. But how much of the explanations are tainted by confirmation bias? This is what they expect to see. When the CERN supercollider was built, one of the big justifications for the CERN supercollider was to look for the Higgs boson, one of the fundamental particles of the universe. And CERN went online in 2009, and they searched and searched for the Higgs boson, and they finally found it in 2012. And that was science well done, but they searched for a few years to find this one boson. I'm just saying, why don't they use this amazing super collider to attempt to accelerate particles past the mass times the speed of light squared limit in Einstein's famous equation? And I'm sure it'll take some doing, but the problem is nobody's looking for that. And when they find some indication that it might happen, there's massive confirmation bias that convinces them, oh, that's not really the case here. There's nothing here to see. Nobody needs to look here. Well, the problem, of course, becomes the peer review funnel and the fact that if somebody suggests, hey, why don't we accelerate a particle past the speed of light, the response that physicists will receive from the community, I think, would be much more than just people looking askance, even if that physicist were not disparaged by his or her colleagues. Where in the peer review world is somebody going to find funding for something like that? You know, and everyone will tell you, well, this has been proven. We all know nothing can go past the speed of light, but no, it's not proven. Does anyone else out there have questions about this stuff? In fact, a lot of people have questions regarding these things. There wouldn't be all the questions that I've brought up so far in this series, and that many people have brought up, and I haven't even got to dark matter yet. So I'm just saying that's one possible track of investigation that can be followed. CERN is there. It may easily have the capability to run the tests. Run them. The main reason for creating the particle accelerator at CERN was to find the Higgs boson. They've now found it. They're still doing good science there, but to find out if you can truly accelerate matter past the speed of light, that would be much bigger than finding the Higgs boson, which was huge. And then there's the test that would prove whether these sum particles exist or not. Now, no one's going to do this test tomorrow. I'm just saying it's out there. You do some of these smaller tests and they start indicating that maybe there's something to my hypotheses. If you sent a satellite into orbit with a nuclear bomb on it, again, for a very good reason, people may not do this, but I'm just saying, and you set up a detector many thousands of miles away from that nuclear explosion, could that detector detect some kind of subatomic particles reaching it before the flash of light reached it from the nuclear explosion? Again, my argument in episode 4 was that the flash of light we see from a nuclear explosion might be the shock wave that's covered in these sum particles as we accelerate subatomic particles from the fuel of the nuclear bomb past the speed of light. So this would be one way to tell for sure. Again, no one's going to do that test tomorrow, but let's start with the smaller tests, the easy tests that can be done just by doing some math, for example. Again, anybody wants to do that math, any result that you get from it, prove me right, prove me wrong, I'll be glad to interview you here on the channel. I don't know. Maybe the phenomenon I was talking about in episode 1 is simply the run-of-the-mill Doppler effect that physicists have long taken into account and has been ruled out decades ago. It's just that if that's the case, I've read a lot on this and I'm surprised it's never come up. Is it not ruled out? Then rule it out. I'm the first to admit maybe I'm wrong on that. What about the questions I brought up about quantum mechanics in episode 3? I don't know. Has anyone looked into that? Now, I'm the first to say it would be extremely cool if I was proven right on any of these things. But that's not even my purpose here. I'm not aiming to be some gadfly claiming everybody else is wrong and I'm right. What I am trying to do, and trying to do in earnest, is to start a conversation. Would it be amazing if scientists started discussing the peer review funnel? If physicists said, you know, if someone were to look at the dark matter issue and come up with a new and unique explanation, they wouldn't be silenced by the peer review funnel. So leave a comment, be part of that conversation, and I'll see you next time when we talk about dark matter.